Hi, welcome to the Get More Students webinar. We are here in the middle of August, and I'm here with Korinne today. We don't
Hello.
actually have Herbert joining us today. He is in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, grappling anacondas or whatever he may be doing in that part of the world, but it's all very exciting for him, so he won't be joining us. But today it'll be mainly myself and Korinne. What we're going to be doing is particularly talking about how to leverage feedback, which is what Korinne is going to be talking about. And I'm really interested in hearing how we can use this, particularly for our online classes, how we can use that to, maybe it's for content, maybe it's for social proof. And again, we're going to get some great ideas from Korinne. So I'm going to just start, though, with, I guess, having a look through some news about what's happening in tutoring and language education. Tutoring and language education is particularly the area that I focus on, particularly with LearnCube. Those are the two areas that we really work on with our virtual classroom and online school software. And it's always very interesting to see kind of what's happening. Now, a lot of us have been feeling the heat over this last summer. And I just wanted to double check that it wasn't just me. No, there's a lot of red all across the globe, including in America as well. So it's definitely not purely a European thing. But I've actually been on paternity leave and enjoying the hot weather. But I mean, it's totally unusual to be having over 30-degree sort of weather. And I wonder if that might actually impact learning. Do people learn more when it's or learn less when it's hot and try and get up? I think we'll wait and see, and I'm sure many of us will be feeling the effects of that. But like from what we've always seen in previous years, we tend to see things really ramp up from September onwards. But there's been some interesting kind of headwinds, in fact, for the edtech sector, which I thought were quite interesting. So a number of big public companies in edtech kind of suggesting that they have fairly much lower forecasts than they otherwise would, from companies that we'd be familiar with, like Coursera, 2U, and FutureLearn in particular, having a really hard time. Edmodo was a company I was very familiar with for many years and kind of was one of the rising stars, and even sort of was looking at, I guess when Google Classroom came out, Edmodo was sort of seen as one of those leaders. In fact, is closing his doors now, which is quite an interesting turn of events. But then again, there's other companies like Duolingo, which I thought was interesting in the language learning center, having a massive increase in their bookings for this last quarter. So interesting to see, a bit of a mixed bag of results, which again, I think is interesting because it provides a bit of a thermometer on, in general, how the education sector, particularly edtech sector, is going. We've also seen some interesting acquisitions. TutorFair was recently acquired by Tutor Superprof, so a French company acquiring a UK company. We've seen another interesting one with Byju's, which is a massive Indian company, also very involved in tutoring, maybe trying to get into the US tutoring market by acquiring 2U. So I think they're kind of, they're still seeing if that's going to work out. But again, all of these things are quite interesting indicators, even if you're a small business, because they tell us, what do these larger companies see in terms of the sector? What do they see in terms of maybe how is like inflation and other things impacting our sector? If you're doing online tutoring, in your own micro way, you're still affected by things like inflation and prices going up, and people maybe not feeling that they have quite as much money as well. So some interesting insights there. And if you have anything else, let me know, Korinne. But I wanted to just give a little quick update.
Yeah, absolutely nothing that's sort of big and meaty like that. There's, I guess, the biggest news from the digital marketing or social media sphere was that Instagram released an update where they were going to make us all have these, full screen images and things like that. And now they've like gone back on it. There was such a kickback, such a, everyone was pushing back against it, that they're now giving it to us as an option and not as the standard format, which is quite exciting because while it's still an option, it means that we can actually really, if we use it early on, we're going to have the bigger impact, because the bigger the images on the screen, the more scroll stopping it is. So that's quite interesting.
And that was sort of a backlash against sort of the TikTokification of Instagram, from what I could gather.
Exactly. I think a lot of millennials, myself included, we're not so pleased about that. So yeah, it was good to see that Instagram actually does listen, and it is giving us an option. So I think that's a good compromise.
Fantastic. Definitely shows that you always have to kind of keep an eye on what the platforms are doing, and also reminding yourselves that if you put too much in one basket, particularly in social media, you don't necessarily own that platform or own the stability of those users.
Oh, there was one other really useful update that happened. I don't know if many people who are with us use Twitter, but Twitter is actually going to be bringing out, and they've started rolling it out already, an edit button. So that means after you've tweeted something and you look back at it and go, oh, okay, that isn't quite what I wanted it to say, you are going to be able to edit and make it, do your corrections or make an update or whatever. Now, the power in this is that it's not just that you can correct mistakes, it's actually that you can update what you said. So say, for example, in the school is a nice easy example. Say you tweeted, oh yeah, we're having an open day on X date. And then after the open day, you can actually go back into that tweet, update it with an image or something like that. All those people that originally liked that tweet will be notified that there's an update. So you're actually able to make your tweets do double the work, double time. So I think that's quite exciting. There's lots of little things that we're going to be able to do to manipulate that in our favor.
That's quite clever, and again sort of shows you how being in on these apps early just gives you a bit of a chance to get more native with them, and so you can leverage them. If it's not immediately, over time you get better at it.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to stop my spiel because I think your spiel is much more interesting, because we are going to be talking more about leveraging feedback, and so I'll pass over the baton to you.
Okay, so how to leverage your feedback for your online classes, and we're going to look at both good and bad. Feedback takes many forms, so it could be a survey, it could be a comment, could be a review. There are lots of different types of feedback, obviously. However, today, because we're focusing on online courses and the sort of digital sphere, we're going to really focus in on those online or those digital types of feedback that we receive. So feedback is inevitable. In fact, we actually encourage engagement on our social media posts and that kind of thing. And most of the time our feedback is quite good, or at least it's sort of not negative. However, there are times when we do receive a comment or a review where it's maybe not as glowing as we would like it to be. So with that in mind, that's where we're actually going to start. We're going to start with dealing with negative feedback. So the key to dealing with negative feedback is to avoid a knee-jerk response. So what does this mean? It actually means that we don't act immediately. We take a moment, whether it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes, it really depends on how emotional you're feeling. And we calm ourselves down and give ourselves the ability to, respond in a professional manner. One thing that I want to point out before we sort of dive into this negative feedback or negative comment is that these kinds of this kind of negative comment that we might receive, it's never truly, or almost never truly, a negative situation in general. There's always a way that we can leverage it, or find an angle that we can use to our advantage in some way, and that's what we're going to look at today. Okay, but before we actually go ahead and respond, it's always a good idea to check the poster out. So what that means is, we want to establish whether they were ever a student. Are they actually qualified to comment on our school or our tutoring business or whatever it is? So that means we want to do a quick record check. We want to check official feedback forms if you have them. And we want to sort of, do our best to work out whether there were any issues with that student while they were with you, that they mentioned to you either officially or otherwise. And what this does is, once we have all the facts, it allows us to really respond properly, and we're informed and we're better equipped to handle whatever the situation is. So when we respond, there are some very simple rules that we need to keep in mind, and I say rules, and I also say when we respond as a given, because we should always respond to comments, whether they're good, bad, or otherwise. So what should we do? we always take the high ground. Okay, we can maintain our professionalism. We don't let our emotions get the better of us. We act in a way where we are showing our best selves at all times. And it kind of reminds me of that saying that the Obamas sort of had when they were in the White House, which is when they go low, we go high. And that's exactly what that is. It's making sure that you are always maintaining your professional stance. We want to keep it brief. We're not aiming for engagement here. Okay, so we don't want to start a back and forth with the person who's made a negative comment. We want to acknowledge the issue and we want to move on. And by that, I don't mean move on as in forget it, get it out of the way. We want to move on, we want to find a direction, a way forward. And if it's a really serious issue, so it might be a real issue. If it's a really serious issue, or if the commenter is really angry and emotional, you might want to take it private. So that means moving it to the DMs or to the emails or some other private, sphere. And we're going to talk a bit more about that in a little while. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. So let's imagine for a moment that you've had a comment on an ad for a free trial class. Okay, and that comment was, teacher can't speak English properly. Okay, how would you respond to that? Okay, remember, we want to be short and polite. We want to state facts, but we also want to use it as an opportunity to set the record straight. Okay, so let's say, hi, whoever it was, thanks for your comment. Actually, all of our teachers are native English speakers with many years of experience. They are also CELTA qualified. If you have any questions, please feel free to send us a DM. So what have we done here? We've politely thanked them for their comments. So we're like diffusing the situation. We're not showing that we're feeling attacked or emotional. So we're being polite. We've set the record straight. So we're addressing that what they've said is just factually incorrect. And then we've used the opportunity to add a bit more information and educate our audience. So we've told them that the teachers are native English speakers, that they have years of experience, and that they're also CELTA qualified. Now, why do we do this? And this is kind of like the most important thing that I'm going to tell you today. But let's give it some background first. So the University of Texas in Austin, they recently conducted a survey and they had a little over 3,000 respondents. And what they found in that survey was that 55% of those people, 100% of the time, read the comments and responses under the posts that they were, looking at on social media. And of all of the people, over 80% regularly read the comments and responses. So those are huge, huge numbers. So basically what this means is that when you're responding to a comment, you're not just responding to the person who made the comment. You're actually responding to all of those people, at least 55% of people who are reading that comment. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we never miss an opportunity to reach out to that 55% and show them, give them some information, educate them, dangle the carrot, whatever it is, but we want to also create answers and responses that address their needs and demonstrate what we can do. So another example. So the situation is, it's just a regular post that you've made and it's just a regular comment. Okay, so it's not an ad, nothing special. Perhaps it's a post about your English courses and the person has written, I'm not rich, can I take your classes? So how would we handle this? This comment isn't exactly negative in the sense that it's not saying, oh, your course is terrible, but it's not actually a positive comment either. It's sort of, it's raising an issue. However, this kind of comment really gives us a wonderful opportunity to educate your audience, get them excited, and dangle a carrot in front of all of those other people that are also, reading this response. So let's look at that. Your answer could be, yes, of course, we have lots of courses at different price points. We even have different types of payment plans. You may even qualify for a scholarship. Please send us a DM if you have any questions. We are happy to help. So what we've done here is we've put this into like a really positive, accepting kind of, we've framed it in a very positive, accepting kind of way. We're saying we have courses for everyone. We have different prices. We have different ways of paying. And the carrot here, and the carrot is for everyone, you might qualify for a scholarship. So all of those other people out there who are reading this are also thinking, oh, maybe I qualify for a scholarship. I need to contact them and find out. So this is what I mean by dangling a carrot. Make sure that you use these opportunities to really, reach out to all those other people, not just the person that you're addressing.
Yeah, I think on that, Korinne, as well, what I'm really loving about both of those responses is they created such a strong comparison that made you look so professional. And it made it very easy for me to ignore any kind of negativity that came from either of those messages, particularly the more angry ones. So I can definitely see where you're going.
Yep, exactly. So what I've done now is I've put together just like a quick list of things that I find really useful when you're dealing with negative comments or on social media or just online in general. And these are things that I also, remind myself if I, get a comment that I am not totally happy with. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're checking our comments and messages daily, okay? Because a quick handling of things means that fewer people are going to see just the bare negative message without your part, without your response. Fewer people are going to see that, and the damage is going to be much less, okay? Because we don't, unless it is a really a comment that's really not constructive and not helpful and really horrifically wrong or offensive, we don't delete negative content, negative comments or negative feedback. We use it to our advantage. So we don't want something just sitting there, your course is too expensive. That can, that can put a bad taste in other people's mouths. We want to be on that as soon as possible so that we can control the narrative. The other thing we want to do is we want to find the positive. What can you highlight? So again, using that example with, the course being too expensive, what we highlighted was, there's various price points, there's payment plans, and there's scholarships. So we used our response to slip in some really strongly positive aspects there. Again, we want to be sure of our facts. We want to fact check to the best of our ability. And we always use it as a chance to educate. As I said before, you're not just replying to the commenter, but to everyone who reads that comment later. And again, move it to a private medium and then say that's what you've done. And also update if it's appropriate. Now, why do we do that? Because otherwise it will just look like you cut off communication, that you don't care. You got to a point and you were like, no, not doing this anymore. So we want to make sure that people who are reading those other comments can actually, understand and see what you've done. So that could be as simple as saying, we've contacted whoever the commenter is privately to talk about this matter further and hope to find a resolution. Something like that, so that the people reading understand what's going on and not that you've just decided enough's enough. Okay. So Google reviews. So before we dive right into these reviews, I also wanted to make sure that we understand why they're really important, but also why they're quite challenging in some aspects, because as great as they are, there's also some, some pitfalls that we really do need to be aware of. So Google reviews are considered to be highly credible. They're independent reviews. So this also can be applied to Trustpilot or any other independent reviewing platform. That's great. They're independent. You can't control what somebody, writes or, what they say in their review. On Google particularly, they count towards your Google star rating. The better your star rating is, the more likely you are to be recommended in a higher position in those search results. And they also count towards your SEO, especially local SEO. So if you think about when somebody Googles, let's say, for example, English School in Manchester, that you get that map with the schools listed down the side. These reviews count towards where you're positioned in that list of schools that appears on the side there. So those are three really important, reasons why we need to be encouraging Google reviews. And then let's look at the flip side, the challenges. So as I mentioned, they are independent. So you literally have no control over which reviews are visible. Good, bad, medium, they are all there. That is beyond your control. Also, anyone can give you a review. The only requirement is that they have a Google account. Now, most people out there will create Google accounts with best intentions. They are honest, truthful people. However, there are trolls out there who create fake accounts or secondary accounts and just write bad reviews for the sake of it. Another thing, and this is a true example. I had a client who had this exact issue. Google doesn't cross-check. So sometimes a review can end up in the wrong place. So I had a client, and the issue was a student, or actually it was 2 or 3 students, had made comments that they weren't life-ending, but they weren't great either. They'd made 3 comments or 3 reviews, and these reviews were actually not for that school. They were real reviews. These were real students who had real experiences and had something, really well-written comments, reviews, all that stuff. This were, authentic in every way, except for they were in the wrong place. They were on the wrong school's Google review. And that was purely because the schools had really similar names and similar locations. So, that can happen. There are ways of dealing with that, but it's, a bit of a circus trying to get that sort of thing sorted out. Okay, so let's have a wee look at this example. Now, this is a real example. This was for Practical Teaching with Technology course offered by the University of London via Coursera. Now, I'm not going to read this to you. I'm going to paraphrase. So Diane, who was a student there and made this review in 2020, gave them a 1-star review. And Diane had some, pretty serious issues. She didn't think there was enough guidance to use some of the tools that were required for the course. She thought that the external guides were not useful, that the workflow was off, and that the course wasn't complete. And she was very frustrated with her whole experience. So if you were going to, if you received a review like this, how would you handle that? Oopsie daisy, where are we? Now, I think the first step when dealing with a negative Google review, and it's the same with all of the other comments and reviews that we could have, that we first need to establish if this is a legitimate student. Now, Diane gives us enough detail that we can, we get the feeling already that she's a legitimate student, but do by all means check this. Trolls are more prevalent than you'd think. I deal with schools who have had comments just by people that were never a student. They're just, so do make sure that you check that that is a legitimate student, and also that, as I mentioned before, just make sure that they are actually talking about your school and your program or your course or whatever it is that you're offering. If you think that you are being trolled, there's a couple of ways of dealing with it. Now, what we should do is comment. So we want to respond, and we're going to respond really professionally, and we're going to not inflame the situation. We're going to just simply say something like, hi, whoever, we can't seem to find you in our records. Perhaps you used a different name when you were at our school. Please contact us, and give them a way to contact you. If it's a troll, they're not going to respond. Therefore, your comment, your response is there. People can see that you've actually, taken action, that you've done your best to try and solve that issue. And that's probably the best and easiest way to deal with it. It's very hard to get reviews removed from Google. So that's always sort of like the number one step, is make sure that you're on it, that you respond to these kinds of things as well. Okay, so let's look at the example response to Diane's comment. So review, what do we want to do? Again, we want to keep it short, okay? People don't want to read gigantic, big responses. We want to address Diane's points, and we want to do it in a really straightforward way, okay? We don't want to complicate an issue that's already quite sensitive, okay? And we also want to state our next steps. That's really important. We want to show that we're actually addressing the issue. So, hi Diane, thanks for your feedback. We've passed it on to our course creator for review. Making sure our course is accessible to everyone is important to us. We've sent an email to the address that we had on file. If you haven't received it, feel free to contact us directly. So what are we doing there? We're diffusing the situation. We're making our point that, okay, it's really important to us that everyone can access the course in the way that they are meant to. And we're also moving it to sort of a more private sphere by saying we've sent you an email, and then we volley the ball back into her court and say, if you haven't received it, then you need to, we've done our part. You can also feel free to contact us.
And one of the other things you've done with this one is that there's no emotion, really. You've kept it very, very kind of vanilla. And I think the other thing that's really important with all of the messages you've shown is that you're not trying to defend the point. You've never tried to defend the point in any of it.
That's exactly right.
And it means that, first of all, you've got a shorter post, which is easier for people to read, remembering that the biggest impact is actually on those that read this later rather than even this person.
Exactly.
And then the second thing is usually you never look that good when you get defensive, and it makes them more aggressive, which makes you more likely to prolong the pain. So all of these, I've just noticed that, and that was another great example.
Thank you. We just want to keep things really calm. We want to be professional. We want to take the high road. Maybe they do have a real issue that needs to be addressed. We don't want to go out guns blazing and just, make the situation so much worse than it is. So we just want to, make sure that we are calm and that we're acting in a way that doesn't inflame the situation anymore. Because remember, things are hard to remove from the internet. If you go off, if you lose it, if you, become emotional, that is going to hurt you for months, potentially years later down the track. So that's what we don't want to do. So just following on from Alex covered that off. So what we're doing is we're setting the record straight, we're educating, we're demonstrating to all those other people out there that we take our students' concerns seriously, and that's regardless of whether it's a real concern or not. The fact that we're going to look into it anyway. We want to demonstrate that we do actually care, because that's really important to potential students, that they feel heard and that there's somewhere that their voice is actually important as well. How you handle the problem, and Alex, you touched on this before, how you handle the problem makes a bigger impact almost every time than the actual original issue. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're using this opportunity. Whenever there's a negative, we're going to use this opportunity to, get something positive out of it. Okay. So we've spent quite a bit of time now looking at all the negatives. So I want to switch focus a little bit and talk about maximizing, or how to use our positive comments, reviews, and feedback, because often these are the ones that get left without any attention. So you get a positive review and you're like, oh, okay, that's nice, end of story. But we can also use positive reviews, comments, and feedback, really to our advantage. There's so many different ways that we can leverage these kinds of things to help us with our sales, our leads, or even just building our brand and our reputation. So what we want to do, as I just said, we want to always respond, always. Even if it's just a very short, great course, we want to make sure that we respond. We want to control this narrative, and we want to, make sure that we are, that we're showing people that we are really involved in what's going on. Let's jump straight into an example. Now, this again is a real review, and it's a response that the response as well, I lifted from the remote learning school. Now, before we look at the actual, the response, or the comment and response, I would say that it's, in my opinion, a little bit too much. It's a little bit too long, and it's also a little bit too personal for my taste. But in general, it definitely ticks all the boxes of a really great reply. So with that in mind, that it's a bit long and a little bit too personal, let's have a look at what's going on here. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the comment was 5 stars from a mom who was extremely happy that her kids would rather be learning than playing video games or watching TikTok. And then Connor, who was the remote learning school rep, made the reply. And it's a pretty textbook reply, actually, if we're looking there. So what he's done is he's straight away personalized it. Or first he says, thank you for the review. Important that we thank everybody. And he's personalized it straight away, where he talks about your son. Later on, he talks about your daughter, and he talks about some things that are quite specific to this person. I assume it's a woman. She says, mummy, specific to their children. He also gives he does a good job of giving some extra information about the school. So he's thinking about those other people that are reading this review later on. So he gets in there that the school has a magazine, that they offer journalism classes, piano classes, these kinds of things that, you know, could be interesting or could pique attention because they're not like normal things that you would expect from an online school. So he's getting out there a few sort of bits of extra information. And then he's dangling a carrot, and he dangles this carrot, you know, in the form of, he says, he's talking about the journalism classes, and he says, journalism students perform better on standardized tests, make higher GPAs, and earn higher grades in their first semester of college. Now, again, this is a little, he's laying it on a little thick in my opinion, but the actual, the idea behind it is spot on. So which parent doesn't want their kids to do better in tests? Which parent doesn't want their kids to have higher GPAs? So he's really dangling that carrot. And then he does it again when he's talking about the daughter playing the piano. So piano is a wonderful skill to have. It's excellent for improving focus and concentration skills, and so on and so on. Again, laying it on a bit thick, but the idea behind it is perfect. He's, you know, what parent doesn't want their kid to have, you know, better concentration? He's really sort of touching on those pain points or those issues that parents have with their children in general, and, you know, making, sort of inspiring people to think, oh, okay, I want that too. So it is actually a pretty good example of a decent response.
Korinne, I'm just kind of curious on that one, because
let me go back.
Just to be, I guess my criticism of it is particularly in the length.
Yeah,
it's
too long.
It's too long, so I would never really read it. And then the nuggets are stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious because part of me, and I'm really interested in your opinion on this, part of me feels like your response is more about do you think it's about reinforcing what they've said by actually adding more information? Or do you actually just it's more about glancing people back into like, hey, remember, or pulling out the best piece
I think
of what they said?
If it was me, okay, I think that, as I said, I think it's a little bit too personal. So I would have stripped some of that personal stuff out and probably given a bit more information about the actual course as opposed to that research. I mean, he could have said that in far less words. I think it's still like a nice piece of information, but it is very wordy. So I probably would have stripped that out. You know, it's nice to be personal and address the person, you know, your son wrote a great story for our magazine. You know, we don't need that. Thank you for sharing it. We've already thanked them for the reviews. You know, it's a little bit heavy on, it's a little bit wordy. And then they talk about the journalism classes. I mean, we don't need the junior report card stuff. We could have just gone back in and said that, you know, it's exciting. He's taking journalism classes. Usually our classes are for kids aged blah, blah, blah to blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, given some information about the actual course that other parents could use, and making it less about that specific child and more sort of general.
That's great. I mean, interestingly enough, the last sentence is the most generic. If Connor just wrote that, what would be your criticism of that?
Well, I mean, that it doesn't bring you any further. It doesn't, we want to use these as, I hate to use to call it sales, because we're talking about reviews, which are emotive, but it is at the end of the day, you know, a lead generation tool. So we want to bring people that are not this mother. We want to bring them closer to enrollment with our course or with our school. So, I mean, that wouldn't be enough. That would be like, oh, great, your kids are having a great time, but it doesn't tell anybody else why their kids would also have a great time.
So part of what you've told, so what I understand from what you've said here is that last sentence would give you like a glancing, like, cool, move on.
Yeah.
Whereas the personalization and the kind of pulling different strings out allows you to get, as you say, it's about getting that person closer to purchase or down that buying cycle. All right, that's quite a differentiation I hadn't seen.
You can't control what someone's going to write. The only thing we can control is how we respond to what somebody's written. So even if they've had a great experience, they are not likely to be really specific as to what about that experience was really great. So, you know, oh, I loved my English course. My teacher was really fun. Well, then it's our job to actually elaborate a little bit more about, you know, what kind of English course it was, or, you know, give other people If they haven't provided the reason, then we need to color that. We need to control the narrative and give those details so that other people, they might be reading through it and they might go, oh, okay. Oh, so that was the general English course. Okay. So now I know what to inquire about when I do make my inquiries. Because the people who are reading these reviews they're already part way into that process of enrollment, whether it's just the very beginning and they're just sort of, getting a feel for what's out there, or whether they've already decided between, 2 or 3 schools and they're going to make that last step. So we're not talking generally about people who have no interest in learning English. If you're in English school, they're just reading English school reviews for fun. That doesn't happen. They're already involved. So that's what we want to do. We want to think of them, and we want to think of how do we, without turning this into, a super salesy, in your face kind of come to our school kind of scenario, how do we bring them one step closer to enrollment?
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so things to remember when we respond. So if you can, make it personal, look it up. Is there something that you can add? Again, if it's appropriate. And we don't want to go too personal. I mean, I think talking, how Connor had mentioned an article that was featured in a magazine, all of those other people out there, they don't need to know that. It's more interesting to them that there is a magazine and, there's journalism classes. That's more interesting than a specific article in a specific magazine. So use your best judgment. Mention courses by name. So again, as I just said before, if somebody said, oh yeah, I studied English and it was great, well then in your response, you'd make sure that you would actually name what course that was, if you can. Give some interesting details if it's appropriate. And that could be, for example, if you're a tutor, you could say, business English conversation, which are always taught one-on-one, or, just something little interesting that sort of, again, gives a little bit more information without being, without writing a book. Use your keywords, use words that you think that when somebody is Googling for you, think of the words they might be using, or the way they might be searching for you. Try and include those kinds of keywords in your responses. They are crawled by the algorithm. They do matter. Make sure you say thanks, make the reviewer feel appreciated, because even in this day of age, word of mouth marketing really still counts. And that could also mean, word of mouth online, or it could be word of mouth in person. If somebody feels appreciated, they've already had a great time. So they're already thinking about you in a positive way. And if they feel appreciated, then they're actually going to take that next step and talk to you to other people. Demonstrate your knowledge or expand the topic if appropriate. And send the reviewer, and this is what I do. I send the reviewer a quick email privately, thank them again, and invite them to contact me again if they ever want, when it's one of my services again in the future, or whatever. So you can do that. You can contact them and say, look, if you or anybody that would like a Spanish conversation course in the future, then by all means reach out. Be really happy to help you. I'm really happy to welcome you back, or whatever it is. But I mean, that doesn't take long, doesn't have to be super personal. Can be sort of a prepared text that you just sort of swap out little bits and pieces. And it's a really strong way of just, building that
momentum, right?
Yeah, exactly. Building that momentum and making sure that, that people are speaking about you in a good, strong, positive way. So how do we maximize all this goodness? So we have these good reviews, we have these good comments, whatever they are. How do we use, what are some of the ways that things we can do to actually use these reviews and comments? So let's have a look. So obviously we want to share it. So if it's possible, we want to share it directly to our social media. So that could mean if somebody's reviewed you on Facebook, you're then able to share that directly onto your feed. However, if you can't do that, take a screenshot, post that. Just because it's a Facebook review doesn't mean that you can't screenshot it and use it on Instagram or LinkedIn or on your website or wherever you want to put it. Take a screenshot, push it out everywhere, okay? Use it on your website. So you can either embed directly from Google or Trustpilot or wherever those reviews are. But again, you can't, well, there are naughty plugins that will strip out the negative comments, but they're not good things you don't do that. Don't be tempted to do that. That in the long run, that will end up harming you when Google does a crawl and realizes that you're using such plugins. So do remember that you've got to be quite confident that if you're embedding from Google or Trustpilot or whatever, that you are going to have to show everything, warts and all. You could copy the content of the review or the comment to your reviews page or your testimonials page on your website. And don't forget identifiers. And what I mean by that, that's like their name or where they're from, this kind of thing, because the more identifiers you have, the more authentic and credible that review or comment seems. Just be careful, make sure you have permission to do so, and make sure that it's actually allowed in your region to, identify people in that way. One of the things that isn't done enough is actually going back to that person and asking the student or the parent or whoever it is for more. Be cheeky, ask for more. Send them an email, ask them, oh, look, can we send you a few more questions that would really help us with X? Or if you can say to them, do you think you could make us a 1-minute video testimonial? Doesn't have to be anything special, just smartphone, selfie mode, talk for up to a minute. That's perfect. It's absolutely amazing content for social media, could be used on your website. You could edit it later into something that looks more slick. But do go back and ask for these things, because if they've already made a positive comment or review, then they're already thinking of you in a good way, and they're quite likely to say yes, or at least be open to the idea. So that is actually it from me. I'm looking forward to, well, I'm sure Alex will come up with a question or two, but if anyone else has any questions, then feel free to throw them at me and I'll do my best to answer them. But if you're watching this later, or if you think of something later on, you're very welcome to also contact me directly. So you can see my Instagram handle there. That's generally the fastest way to contact me, or you can send me an email, which is my email address on the bottom there.
That was fantastic content there, Korinne. So thank you so much for leading us through that. Amazing. Well, let's move to a more sort of conversation mode, if we'd like. So I'll stop sharing the screen.
There you go.
And then I had a couple of questions. The first one was with particularly angry customers, those that swear, those that, there can be quite some really ugly stuff that kind of comes out. How do you deal with somebody that publicly is like swearing profanities and that kind of thing?
There is a couple of things that you could do. Number one, and this is kind of a general rule. So if somebody's made if it's a comment, so reviews are a little bit different, but if it's a comment and the comment is on a post that is more than 2 weeks old, just delete the comment. Yeah. Because no one's going to look on Instagram. The chances of somebody actually spending time to scroll back further than 2 weeks, very, very low. Just get rid of it. And report it as well, because that behavior is never okay. If it's a review, I mean, if it's a Google review, you can also report it. What I would do, because it's actually quite difficult to get them removed, although if it's really profane, Google will actually censor it. Yeah. But I'm also thinking that maybe the worse it is, particularly on Google, in a way, it does you a better service. Like the more emotional they and kind of especially crazy they look, it's especially like if it's, again, if it's someone who's really was a student, and these cases, it's really important to establish what actually has happened here. So if somebody's really angry and is being profane, chances are they had a really terrible experience. If it's a authentic, and you already know about it. Okay. So for example, there's a couple of ways of dealing with it. You can go back to them and you can say, hi, whoever, how would I put this? You could, say what you've already done to solve that problem. So this is an issue that we were aware of during your time with us. And, we reached out to you and we offered you this and this, or, at the time you accepted and we thought that we'd resolved the issue. We're sorry that you still have, that you're still, this is still not resolved for you, please contact us via email, or, you know, and move it off. We move it that way. But again, we just want to be really calm. If it was an issue that existed and you have taken steps to deal with it, make sure that you say that, because that, again, and I don't, sounds awful.
Does that sound kind of like defensive though? Like, I wonder if people lash out against that.
They might, but at the same time, they're already being like
really rude.
Yeah, exactly. So to up at another level is kind of, it looks bad for them if you've gone in like really emotionless and said, you know, we took steps A, B, and C. We believed it was resolved. You know, so, and then say, you know, we're sorry, it's not resolved for you. You know, contact us this way, and you know, then then you're still coming across as caring. You're still saying, okay, we were aware of this, and we actually did take these. Because again, other people want to see that you took action, that you address this in some way. If it's someone that you can't find, that, you know, has never been a student and it's just a nasty troll, then you just write that. You say, you know, this person was never a student at our school, or was never participated in any of our tutoring courses. And therefore,
I think your technique though before was probably better than that, because if you write that, it kind of gives them an opportunity to defend that. Maybe they just are writing under a new username. But what you said before, I thought was brilliant, which is like, hey, I'm really sorry, I can't find you.
And that's always
because then they have to respond in a more objective manner.
Exactly. They have to. You know, it takes the sting out of everything.
It does.
And it demonstrates to everybody else that we are, you know, that we are taking active steps to try and resolve this.
And it kind of alludes that, particularly if that person doesn't look like they're on your books, it kind of suggests that to anyone reading as well.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think that was really good. I hadn't really thought so much about double kind of providing that that extra reinforcement when people do positive reviews. So I really enjoyed that. And it kind of also gives you another chance to kind of push. I think usually those comments will often push out to all of the other people that maybe commented on the same thread or looked at that.
Exactly. A lot of the time, you know, people get notifications, or, you know, if somebody also, so for example, somebody makes a positive comment on LinkedIn's a good example, because they give you notifications for everything unless you turn them off. So say somebody you've made a post and somebody was like, oh, this is really great. You know, so it doesn't necessarily have to be about a whole course. It could just be about a post or a single item or episode. And they've said, you know, this is really great. And then you respond to that. And then, you know, somebody else comes in, and then everybody is getting notified that there's all this stuff going on. So, I mean, that's also a good way to make sure that you keep in front of people's eyes as well. Just make sure that you respond, and, you know.
Fantastic. Well, Korinne, I think you've really given a lot of excellent advice here today. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
You've seen where you can contact Korinne. That place again, Korinne, is
either on Instagram. Probably the easiest way, my handle is kaya._marketing. So it's probably easier just to search Korinne, Korinne Algie, and you'll find me. The only one out there in the whole wide world. So you will find me. And if you get really stuck, you can always contact Alex at LearnCube, and he'll tell you where to find me.
That's it. So you can also contact us and check out LearnCube at www.learncube.com. And if you'd like to be part of the Get More Students community, we have that at getmorestudents.org. And I mean, I found this so valuable today. So thank you again, Korinne.
You're
and we'll
very
see you
welcome.
next time. Yeah.
See you later.
Again. Bye.
Bye.